Okay, I think it's about time to begin. Everybody settle down now. I could give y'all a minute to run around, jump around. That's what I do to my class on Wednesday night. I give them 1 minute to run around, jump around, get it out of their system. So y'all need a 1 minute? Take longer. All right. Anybody remember where we are? No, I'm just playing. 2 Kings chapter 4. We left this young man who died with a rod on his face from Elisha. So we want to see what happens after that. So we're in 2 Kings chapter 4, talking about the Shunammite son that evidently had a heat stroke or something and died. And, of course, she came to Mount Carmel where Elisha was in desperation and asking for his assistance. And she was very determined because she wouldn't talk to Gehazi, the servant of Elisha. And when she left, riding and, trying to get there as quick as she could. It's about a 13-mile journey, so the distance that she covered on horseback or, whatever she was on must have been I don't know, I guess people back then are used to that kind of thing, but I can't imagine, going 13 miles on a horse. But anyway, she gets to Elisha, and Elisha sends Gehazi, on the way, but the woman doesn't go with Gehazi. She stays with Elisha. And we noted that there is a structural theme, I think, that's connecting this to Elisha when Elijah kept telling Elisha to stay here and I'm going to go over there, but Elisha kept saying, no, I'm coming with you. And we find the same thing that's happening with this woman in desperation. She does not want to leave the prophet. And so as Gehazi goes to the house, he lays the prophet's rod or staff on top of the child who has been put on a bed in an upper room where Elisha would stay at this great woman's house, this woman of wealth that they had built for him. And so Gehazi returns while Elisha and the woman are on their way and says, hey, I put your staff on the child, but nothing happened. So it brings up the question, I guess Gehazi thought that the staff would raise the child from the dead or something like that, or some miraculous thing, because that's usually how it goes. You have a prophet or, somebody like Moses, something, the staff has when they use it and they wield it, it has some miraculous power, God behind it. But I wanted to ask you, was he just assuming something, or why was the staff placed on the child, the dead child, before Elisha arrived? Do you have any ideas about that? I think that's where we left off last time, and you didn't generate any ideas then, so I want to see if you have any ideas now after you've had 2 weeks to think about it. Yeah, right. We assume, I think, because we're dealing with the prophet Elisha, that there's something miraculous associated with the staff. But it could be, it could indicate, no one moved the body because, the prophet's coming, which I tend to think that's probably what's going on here.
Well, the staff didn't make him, according to the servant, he put the staff on his face, but it didn't awake him.
Yeah, it didn't do anything. So he's kind of surprised.
Yeah.
Gehazi says, the staff doesn't work, what's wrong? But I think we assume certain things. We got to be careful about always assuming, well, what's going on here? Well, it may not be anything going on. It could be that the prophet's coming, you know, an indication to anybody there, the father, or the servants, or whatever, that the prophet's coming. Or maybe it's a symbol of anticipation, you know, what the prophet's going to do. I really don't know because the text doesn't tell us. It just says Gehazi evidently had some expectations, but he wasn't the man of God, you know, when he placed it on the child. So that's where we are in the story. The child is still dead, and Elisha is on his way with the woman. And so let me pick up in 2 Kings chapter 4, beginning in verse 27. And when she came to the mountain, to the man of God, she caught hold of his feet, and Gehazi came and pushed her away. But the man of God said, "Leave her alone, for she is in the bitterness of distress, and the Lord has hidden it from me and has not told me." And I find that kind of interesting, that, you know, a lot of times the prophet kind of knew what was going on, but God had not revealed anything to him. And I wonder if there's any significance of that.
It's a fascinating glimpse into the life of a prophet. It's not like they were walking around with just, well, I know this guy's going to get run over. I know this guy's going to get, you know, they didn't have this glimpse into what everybody's future was.
Right.
They were given just messages from God at the appropriate time.
At the proper time. To realize, I think, even to emphasize to the prophet that you're not the dude, you know, you're a servant of God. So God is using you, but that doesn't mean he discloses everything to you. So, you see, he says, "Did I not ask my Lord for a son?" This is the desperation of the mother. "Did I not say, 'Do not deceive me'?" He said to Gehazi, "Tie up your garment, take my staff in your hand, and go. If you meet anyone, do not greet him, and anyone who greets you, do not reply, and lay my staff on the face of the child." Then the mother of the child said, "As the Lord lives, and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." So he arose and followed her. Gehazi went on ahead and laid the staff on the face of the child. But there was no sound or sign of life. Therefore, he returned to meet him and told him, "The child has not awakened." Okay, verse 32. When Elisha came to the house, he saw the child lying dead on his bed. So he went in and shut the door behind the two of them and prayed to the Lord. Then he went up and lay on the child, putting his mouth on his mouth, his eyes on his eyes, and his hands on his hands. As he stretched himself upon him, the flesh of the child became warm. You might remember that Elisha's teacher did the same thing, you know, previously to raise a child from the dead. But I find it, you know, you look at it, it looks kind of odd, doesn't it? You have this grown man that's on top of the child, and I don't know, things in the Old Testament sometimes are very dramatic. And I'm wondering, what is it about what Elisha is doing that is significant? You know, why not just, you know, tell the child to arise? Why the elaborate, you know, drama that's going on in bringing the child back to life? Huh?
I see it, of course, I see it from the medical side. I see it as him transferring his strength and his warmth to the child through his own body.
Yeah. Some commentators, that might be right, that he's laying on the child to get it ready to, you know, receive the soul again, to raise him up, and he's warming the body. I don't know. Go ahead.
Don't we assume that's what was commanded?
Yeah.
We're not told that. But
Yeah, we're not told. It
No,
could be.
we're not told a lot of things that we are able to draw conclusions from, like Naaman, you know.
Yeah.
You know, why not the waters of Damascus and all?
Well, the only thing I can think of that we do have a textual evidence is that this is what Elijah did. So he's following the example of his teacher, right?
Well, Cain and Abel, you know, Abel offered a more perfect gift offering, and, you know, but we're not told, we just know that both of them were told because they heard the truth, or they had to be instructed to know what kind of
Yeah, yeah.
gift offering to.
Faith comes by hearing, you know,
Right.
that's the passage we usually think about. So he lays on top of the child, and the flesh of the child became warm. Then he got up again and walked once back and forth in the house, and went up and stretched himself upon him. And the child sneezed 7 times, and the child's eyes opened. I don't know. I find all this stuff interesting.
Well, also he breathed on him, you know,
Yeah.
mouth to mouth.
So maybe that's where that eventually came from, you know?
Yeah,
The mouth resuscitation.
Is that a perfect sneeze?
Huh?
Is that a perfect sneeze? He sneezed 7 times?
Yeah, 7 times. You know, it's interesting.
Name it up 7 times?
Well, I mean, numbers seem to be significant to indicate, you know, he's fully alive. Everything is back to where it was before he died. Of course, without the heat stroke and the headache. But it is funny to me. I don't know if I would take it as funny, but to see the child's, you know, he sneezed 7 times, you know, why 7? But maybe that's to indicate, you know, the number 7 is significant in Scripture, to mean completion or perfect, you know. So it's complete. He's been raised from the dead. It says, then he summoned Gehazi and said, call this Shunammite. So he called her, and when she came to him, he said, pick up your son. She came and fell at his feet, bowing to the ground. Then she picked up her son and went out. I find the order of what happened here very instructive. What do you know about the Shunammite woman's reaction?
You would think she would have gone directly to the son.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be what you would have done? You'd gone to the son, you know, grabbing up your arms. What did she do though? She went
She fell at
and
his
offered
feet.
gratitude to the prophet. That's very instructive, isn't it? It reminds me of what situation in the New Testament. Remember the 10 what? Huh? 10 lepers?
Yeah.
Remember Jesus healed all 10? And as they were walking, they realized that they were healed, you know, going to show themselves to the priest. And one did what? He turned back to offer gratitude, to thank Jesus for what he had done for him. And he said, where are the other 9? I think it's a good question, right?
Yeah.
God blesses us in many ways, and Jesus is still saying, God's saying, where's the other 9? Where's the other 9? So what does that indicate? Maybe. I mean, I'm not saying anything about the 9. I mean, I'm sure they're grateful, they're happy, they're joyful, but they are missing out on what I think is a greater blessing, which is
Gift to give them.
giving God thanks. We're missing out on a greater blessing when we don't do that. It's almost as if they, you know, maybe they got so excited in the moment, you know, as we might do, but it was the foreigner, if you remember, wasn't it, that came back to thank?
Yeah.
Perhaps the other 9 being, I'm assuming they're Jewish, that they took things for granted. And maybe that's their problem. They always took it for granted. God's blessing they took for granted. Maybe to come back and realize what the blessing was and what God has done for us. That's offering, if you please, the first fruits of praise. Do you get that? Whether it is from our harvest, from our income, from our whatever, who gets the praise first? It's God. Why? Is it that God needs it? God doesn't need it. God doesn't need, you know, He's God, right? But what is it for? It's for us. It's for us. We've got to learn that returning and giving things to God is something that we as human beings need And I would ask you why. Why is there a need for that? Why do we need to return to give thanks?
Well, in the Old Testament, this particular example, he returned and gave thanks after he was blessed. Now, at least in terms of anxieties, be anxious for nothing but by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving. So you're giving thanksgiving before you even receive the blessing is what so it's faith. So,
Yeah,
without faith, you
yeah,
can't
yeah.
please God, so.
I think there's the assumption that God's people are people of thanks to God. There's a relationship there and an understanding, I think, of one who is over all things. And we need to do that. I think it's good for a reminder, right? But it's also good for our soul. I think it reframes things. It keeps us out of the thinking of secular society. It keeps us in tune and in check with God.
I think it also is kind of an example for today, how we need to always be thankful for what we have. I want to tell you a little short, quick story. I was working and I did EKGs everything. And I did an EKG in Dr. Durden. I don't know if any of you guys know Dr. Durden in Tallahassee. I was in the ER that night, and I brought it to him, and this little girl was in there. She was about 3 or 4 years old, and I handed it to him, and he didn't say anything. And the little girl sat there a minute, and then she looked up at her daddy. She stood up, she said, "But Daddy, you forgot to say thank you." So, that was a reminder. We all need reminders to appreciate what we have, because everything we have comes from God.
And I think it's not just thinking it, it's the expression of it. She fell at I don't think she was worshiping the prophet. I think she was showing overwhelming gratitude. And then she ran and got her child. So the order of things is very important. To me, that seems to be an important religious lesson that's brought out by this event. All the other things, the incidentals, I call them incidentals, maybe they're not incidentals. I'm always looking for the higher lesson here. What is it? What is the reason why this is recorded? What is it that God wants us to understand? Well, you got a prophet who is the representative of God, just raised a child, and you got the response to it. Okay, and so those things to me are the overarching. We could probably get into muddy waters if we talk about the power of the staff, watching the word. Maybe Elisha laid on it the first time and it didn't work, and so he paced. We're reading into a lot of things. We don't know. What is the overarching, religious message? Dallas, are you gonna say that?
Yeah, I just had a question. Is there anything to indicate that she had any doubt that she would not receive her child back?
I don't think so. There's
And
nothing
so-
to me.
It doesn't seem like it to me either. I just want to make sure I'm not talking about reading stuff into it. But it seemed like she had this expectation that if anybody could fix her, this loss, it was Elisha.
God
you know,
could. Yeah.
through God, through Elisha.
Right. That's who she with.
If I could just get to God through Elisha,
Yeah.
that I will be restored.
And what do you take from the prophet and his reaction to the Shunammite woman? I mean, God's pretty busy, don't you think, holding the world together? And yet, through the prophet, what do we find?
Compassion.
Yeah, you have compassion. You wonder why Jesus did so much in regards to sickness, bringing people back to life, being concerned about various things that are going on in the private lives of individuals. Seems to me to be bringing one really down from the glory that they have. But see, that's not the way God thinks. Today, you wonder, those in very high positions or those who are, legislators and those, whatever, would they have the same compassion for an individual, or always they're looking for, something other than being involved in such a way? And I know it's different times, but really, is it? Don't we find the same emphasis in the New Testament in God's concern for people? I think so. Yes, God.
I think, maybe he, took that opportunity to set an example for others too.
Well, absolutely. Who is Elisha leading and teaching? Who? The sons of the prophets. I mean, he's the teacher and the mentor of, every now and then we find like 50 sons of the prophets, 100 here. And so there is, in various locations, what I would refer to a school of prophetic training, of training people to be prophets or spokespeople of God. It's an interesting thing that is revealed in these chapters, because we don't read much about the schools of prophets later. It's just during this time. So I think we're to understand that even though there's specific prophets that are named and they do amazing things, we forget that they're mentoring and teaching preachers, others to carry forth activity in other areas, whether it's to rebuke sin or what have you. Sometimes we have unnamed prophets, you see, that go. God tells them to go somewhere and preach against a king or something like that. So it's not that Elisha and Elijah are doing all the work. That's the only work that's going on that we read about. There must be a lot of activity among the nation concerning these other individuals that are representing or trying to be preachers, and some of them failed. We read about it as well. Anybody have any thoughts?
Scott,
Yes.
I'd like to roll back a minute to when
We've gone forward.
when the leopard, came and thanked the Lord. One of the reasons I think why we need to know is because, I don't know about you, but I'd a whole lot rather do for someone that appreciates what I do than to do for someone who doesn't.
Yeah.
And we need to understand, I'm sure he thought, well, I need to thank him because, he'll be more willing to help me if I need it in the future too. That's a thought too.
Yeah.
Because
It seems to me that she had.
more willing,
Yeah.
we want to help. We want to help those that appreciate what you do.
Yeah.
Gives us more motivation to do.
Yeah. But from the standpoint of what I read about her, she had total trust in this prophet. I mean, even in the beginning when she's introduced, she sees the man of God walking by her house, and she tells her husband, let's build for him. So there's something there of admiration, respect of what Elisha represents, or who he represents, I guess I should say. Okay, here we go to a series of miracles that involves the sons of the prophets. Okay, and again, I ask you, in the recording of these events, what is it that it's teaching us? What's the overarching message to us? Because we're dealing with things that are miraculous. But then again, Jesus showed a side of him and doing miraculous things for people that I think this is foreshadowing. Okay? Remember, I said I believe that Elijah and Elisha are foreshadowing the ministry of Jesus, because a lot of the events are parallel. So I think they are representing a model in a sense. Brother Cullen, you want to say something?
Compassion to Jesus.
Compassion to Jesus,
Our
yeah.
compassion
Yeah.
comes down to us.
Yeah. So the involvement of God in the, how should I say it, comparatively speaking, the menial things from the perspective of God, you know, why would God be concerned about this individual when there's billions of individuals on planet Earth right now, you know? I think this is a reminder of the value that God places in us. Dallas was it?
It's fascinating because these are major figures that are interacting with kings, but they're also interacting at a normal person level
Yeah,
as well.
yeah.
And so it's almost like God wants to give us a snapshot in that He cares about this entire nation. But at the same time, there are individual needs that He's going through and meeting, either through Elijah, and the other prophets that are there too. God still has a heart for the entire people, not just the kings.
Not just the people, yeah.
But they interacted at a very high level in a lot of ways. A lot of these prophets did, you know. These are levels of government that I don't have any access to, you know, but Elisha had. But he's also interacting with the lowly, the humble, the Shunammite woman that just is a, you know, part of a property owner's, you know, life or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Elijah would go and meet Ahab and call him on the carpet about things. But there is something significant. I think there's also something significant about, I don't know, the reputation of a righteous life. It's very powerful. You know, you think in the book of Ecclesiastes, I can't think about what it is, but there is a statement that says, a poor man, I can't remember exactly the words, but can save a city. You know, and we think it would take somebody else, but we have a righteous poor man who ends up delivering the city. And that just shows you a lot of times things are opposite of what we think they are, right? We might think there's no power or influence as an individual, but there really is, particularly in, you know, living God's way. So we go to an episode in which the sons of the prophets are gathered for a meal, and you know, this is interesting. I think you're getting a little insight into the daily activities, in a sense, of a prophet. And so he's meeting with the sons of the prophets here. So one of the things that Elisha did, as well as Elijah, they went to locations, you know, where these schools of prophets were. So, and Elisha came again to Gilgal when there was a famine in the land. And as the sons of the prophets were sitting before him, he said to his servants, set on the large pot and boil stew for the sons of the prophets. So what do you put in stew? Okay, that's what they're going to go out and look for. They got this water going, and so now they got to fill the pot. And so the sons of the prophets, they go out and they're trying to find, you know, because there's a famine, and they're trying to get, you know, all kinds of things to throw in the stew. All right. So continue reading. It says, one of them went out into the field and gathered herbs, and found a wild vine, and gathered from it his lap full of wild gourds, and came and cut them up into the pot of stew, knowing not knowing what they were. Well, I think we're to assume that these are not good victuals, that they may have a reaction. I don't know if it has to do with being poisonous in some way, or it's going to make him extremely sick. But just think about this guy, okay? He's the son of a prophet. He's out there picking things. He doesn't know. I don't know why he doesn't know, but he gets these gourds or whatever, you know, puts it in the pot. So they're about to have this little banquet of stew.
Hey, look, I've been hungry enough.
Yeah,
Right
you're
down
gonna eat
the
a
road,
gourd?
I'm like, you look at some roadkill and you're like, you know, if you fry that up real good, it wouldn't be so
Like
bad.
a good little flank or something on the grill.
Just saying. So this dude's probably hungry. He's a hungry preacher, you know?
Yeah. Of course, you got to remember, it's a famine. So what is the first thing Elisha does? there's going to be a meal. All right, so it's going to be unlike any other meal, a deadly one so far. And they poured out some for the men to eat, but while they were eating of the stew, they cried out, "O men of God, there is death in the pot." So I don't know if probably maybe they tasted it or something, realized it, and they're going, "Whoa!" It just wasn't edible, right? So here it's now I want you to notice something about Scripture, okay? Things can always get what? Worse. I mean, it's real bad now. Now they eat it, and it's still a famine. The famine hasn't gone away, has it? And they still have the food. They can't eat what's before them. Imagine having something there, okay, food, that, but you can't eat it because it's not consumable. So what's going to happen? Well, God takes care of the problem, doesn't he? Why didn't God take care of the problem beforehand? Telling this guy, don't do that.
Because he's
It's,
teaching. He's teaching.
He's teaching.
There's a lesson in this.
Okay. So they poured out some of the food for the men to eat. They cried out, and they could not eat it. He said, "Then bring flour." And he threw it into the pot and said, "Pour some out for the men, that they may eat." And there was no harm in the pot. Okay. They've already tasted it. What's flour going to do to it?
Absorb it.
Okay.
Potentially.
I don't know. The flour, I think, is symbolic. There's a miracle that's going to happen. But he's purifying it. He's cleansing it or whatever. He uses this as the object. But what do the men have to do?
Have faith and eat it.
They have to have faith and eat it, right? Throw a little flour in, okay. I don't think so. You will eat it? No, I don't think so.
You taste it first.
Yeah, you go first. So, it's these things that make the Old Testament events really interesting, because the overarching message is what?
Provides.
What?
God provides.
God provides. And of course, we're taking this to, I think the religious message is the point, that they have to trust the prophet if they're going to eat. And so, if the prophet, God says, eat, what are you going to do? You're going to eat.
And
You're going to have faith.
these men were the sons of the prophets.
They were, yes.
So they had already been under his teaching and everything else and had faith in him because they were all right there.
Yeah. I think the sons of the prophets is a title. In other words, they are sons of God, like we would be sons of God. They're in that class of individuals that, are being groomed and trained to be preachers, prophets to the land. And so if you're going to be a son of the prophet, you're going to have to trust your teacher. And the teacher for us is ultimately God, isn't it? Through his word, we got to trust him. But that's, again, the rub. How do I know that throwing a little bit of flour in here and what the prophet did is going to make this stew edible? See, there's that action of following through with what the prophet said. Yes.
Yeah, I wonder if some of them maybe stood back and waited and let the others go first. See if anything happened to them.
And maybe those who stayed around and waited,
See who has the most faith.
the stew was still poisonous. I don't know, but you get the idea that they all went, okay, and they all ate, and everybody was taken care of. So the point of all this is, what's a New Testament passage that would correlate in teaching this principle? There might be several that you can think of. One comes to my mind.
Like the oil, or is it, yeah. That you never she never ran out of.
Yeah, I'm talking about the New Testament. That's under Elijah, wasn't it?
Okay.
What is a New Testament passage that teaches this idea of trust and following through with what God says? And I'll give you a clue. I'll give you the first word. I bet you when I give you that word, you'll think of the verse. Casting
Your net.
Cares.
all your cares upon him because he cares for you. Right? So the point is, religiously speaking, in our faith, the same principles apply, even though this is using an episode, but isn't it still true? Or do we cast our cares, or do we, wait to see how things before we do that? Or, I don't know, do we ever learn from, past experience, how God has taken us through things?
It's got this kind of like praying for something, and then you go ahead and do what you want to do in the first place, and don't wait and see if God's gonna help you with it.
Yeah, you bring out a good word. Often the word wait is synonymous with faith. Wait. And who likes to wait? Who likes
A
to
little
wait?
bit longer than a second after you pray back.
Yeah. I mean, I can remember my mom when I was little making things that smelled so good that, I couldn't wait. I had to. Okay. So we have this, you ask, well, why this episode, this event? Why was it recorded? So you have to ask the question. It's not just for interest. I think it is to raise valuable principles in an interesting event that occurred, of course. But these kinds of things are just coincidentally recorded in the Old Testament. They have a purpose. And we have to see we have to think in broader ideas of maybe from a higher level looking at it. What is it teaching about God? Okay, verse 42. This is very instructive to me. A man came from Baal Shalishah, bringing the man of God bread of his what? His first fruits, 20 loaves of barley and fresh ears of grain in his sack. Now back to Chris's statement about Cain and Abel. I think the reason Abel's sacrifice was accepted is because it was the first fruits of his flock. Cain didn't offer first fruits. He just offered from hearts. It didn't say first fruits. So even back then, there's an established precedent that is really, it's not meant, let me change it. We're not to think that because we give, we have less, because we gave. In actuality, we have more. You see the principle at work? Give, and it shall be what? Given to you. But not just given, but how? Pressed down, shaking, and then overflowing. That's a principle. But it's hard, even for us, because we have a little secular mind sometimes of thinking that's not true. And so we commit, if we're not careful, the sin of Ananias and Sapphira, who sold a piece of property. They agreed to keep back, which is their prerogative, but they came to apostle and said, this is all that we, this is what we gained for the property. So they made it look like they were given the full amount, but they held back. We can, in a sense, if we're not careful, the secular mind can come into our heads, and we might tend to think that we'll gain by holding back, when the opposite is really true. Again, that's looking at life in a practical way through the eyes of faith. not through the eyes of being practical or, you know, human wisdom, wisdom from below. The wisdom of God is from above, and it's contrary in many aspects to what people would think is something that's wise. So, this man comes, and I think given the first fruits, he's obviously is very much aware and appreciative of who the prophet is, who he represents, right? And I find it interesting what's asked of him. He says, bread of the first fruits, 20 loaves of barley, and a fresh ears of grain in a sack. And Elisha said, give it to the men, so that they may eat. But a servant said, who is the servant of Elisha? Gehazi. Okay. Said, how can I set this before 100 men? So he repeated, give it to the men, that they may eat. When God says, give it to the men, so that they may eat, what does God want you to do? Give it to the men. Let him work out the problem. There's not enough from my point of view, but the prophet is saying, God is saying, distribute it. See how this foreshadows the ministry of Jesus and feeding the 5,000 and feeding the 4,000? It's all connected here to teach us something that is not secularly practical or achievable from a human point of view. So, the 100 men, that's a lot, give it to the men, that they may eat. For thus says the Lord, they shall eat and have some left. So he set it before them, and they eat, and they had some left, according to what? The word of the Lord. So again, you have the preparation for Israel, who's reading Scripture, to see firsthand in the first century of the Messiah doing this very thing. And they still don't what? Believe. I can't imagine what it must be like, you know, to live during this episode here, this event, this historical reality, where he said, okay, but I'm telling you, there's not enough, so he keeps going. And how does the bread multiply? I mean, you take a loaf, I don't know, you tear it apart, you put it on, and you know, it never gets small or something, you know, you just keep going and putting it on the plates or the table or the dirt, or I don't know what they're eating on, but, and then you still have some left after 100 individuals are at the table. Remember, this is still during the time of a what? A famine.
Is there any significance to the location where this guy's from?
From at
Baal, whatever? Because I was just reading a commentary that said this is possibly, most likely, a place in Ephraim where Baal was worshipped.
Yeah, and
This was a center of worship for Baal that this guy brings his food from.
Now, we also have to keep in mind, I know that we talk about Baal or Baal a lot as being, the word means master. And God on occasion is called Baal, not in a negative sense, but in a positive sense that he is master. Now, it could be that in the midst of North Israel, we have these altars of Baal worship or whatever, and this individual is, his name signifies Baal or Baal. Sometimes I don't know what to make of that because it's used both in a negative sense and in a positive sense. But what we do see is this individual, though his name seems to be contradictory, okay, comes to the prophet to offer his first fruit. He doesn't take it to the idol of Baal. He comes to God, God's prophet. Which is, if that is to be understood, then we find one who's living in a area of idolatry, who is seeking to serve God, recognizes who the prophet is. Which tells me, by the way, that no matter how secular society becomes or is, we can always do what? Serve God. There's never an excuse not to do so. Okay. So they all eat, and they had some left over, according to the word of the Lord. And so this is to remind us that although Elisha is saying these things, what's the emphasis? God said it, and this is what's going to happen. So we have the emphasis according to the word of the Lord. To remind you, it's not Elisha, but it's God. Now, the danger for Elisha, as is the danger for even those who had miraculous gifts in the first century, is what? What would be the danger of having such a
Self-importance.
huh?
Self-importance.
Self-importance, or elevating themselves above others because they have this gift. And so we'll leave it at that. Our time's up. But stay humble and cast your cares upon the Lord. Be warmed and filled. Let us gather at the river.
Glory.